Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Today I have with me Pandit Satish K Sharma ji from across the pond, and he's going to give us updates on a lot of things that have been happening in United Kingdom. Pandit ji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Ram ji, namaskar ji, and Jai Shri Ram. How are you?
And Jai Shri Ram to you, sir. I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for asking. I was really shocked to find the accusations of racism on three black players who are representing United Kingdom. And it happens in sport. You know, you win some, you lose some, and you know this is penalty kicks, and it's unfortunate that England lost. But this set off a big chain of events. Why don't you kind of walk us through that, Pandit ji, so we have an understanding and appreciation that, you know, things are not quite normal. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be covered.
Yeah, so just to set the scene, as it were. So we have a backdrop here in the United Kingdom where there's been a very vocal movement which has been talking about slavery, reparations. We've seen statues pulled down of people who were slavers. There was the whole thing about the Cecil Rhodes endowment in Oxford, etc. And also the Black Lives Matter movement earlier in the year. So that's the backdrop to it. And then we have Europe, the Euro Cup. And it's been such a long time since England was in the final, I think 1968 or something like this. And so there was a great deal of expectation. It was in front of a home crowd here at London's Wembley Stadium. And so you can imagine, post-COVID, the stadium is absolutely filled with lots and lots of people. In fact, I understand that there were more people in capacity because many fans managed to get in even without tickets. There was such a huge demand to be present. So just imagine that atmosphere. And then into that setting, we have the fact that the full time played out, it was a draw, and so it goes to a penalty shootout. And in the penalties, most of the teams, what they do is they pull specialists. But equally, pulling specialists is one thing. But you also pull people out who are strikers and who are young, and you want to give them a bit of exposure and so on. So it was a very, very courageous point for the coach and the manager. And what happened was that there were two penalty kicks first, and those two were goals that were scored. And then from from England's point of view, there were three more penalties that needed to be taken, and all three, the goalkeeper either saved them or they didn't. The striker wasn't successful. That should be all okay. There should be nothing wrong with that. As you say, some games are won, some games are lost. But then something very unpleasant happened. The three players who were unable to score from their penalty kicks were all of African origin. And just imagine the pressure that they must have been under. Young men, one of them very young man, 18 years old.
All of 18.
And they are there, and they are there in this stadium, and they're given the chance to score and win for the nation. Huge amount of pressure. But on top of that, there is also at the back of their minds the notion that, hang on a minute, what happens if we don't score? Right? That is a very real fear in the minds of many sportsmen of colour. And what actually happened was the three chaps who were unsuccessful, they were all African origin. So we have two scorers who were white, we have three scorers who were black or African origin. And by and large, the crowd was very helpful, very supportive, but there was a very vocal, unpleasant minority who were causing trouble inside the stadium and outside the stadium. And there was a descent into racist abuse. What happened after the match was even worse. There was a torrent of hatred. In one of the boroughs of London, there was a painting on a wall of Rashford, who is a young man, a wonderful striker, impressive record, and he's done a lot of community work. And there was a big mural on the side of a very large building, and there was racist abuse, which was just scrawled and sprayed all over it. So there was a lot of hatred that was expressed, and that suddenly brought the whole thing about England and Britain being a racist country. Now, it'd be unfair to say that the whole country is racist, because I've been in this country, as you know, for the best part of 50 plus years. And in that time, I've met racism, I've met anti-Hindu hatred. I've met colonialism. All of those unpleasant, nasty things. They're certainly there, but not the majority. But the minority who do this are persistent. They are toxic. They're very hateful, and they were very, very vocal in their condemnation and not shy in bringing to everybody's notice the fact that the three people who scored, the two people who scored were white, and the three who didn't were black. You know, it's just such a basic, inappropriate, unevolved connection to make, to say that, well, the white guys scored, so they're better, and we're white, so we're better, we're more superior. The guys who didn't score are all black, and, you know, rightfully, we feel even more superior. It's just such a animalistic, uncivilized approach. And the fact that it's still present in the 21st century here in England is a really worrying thing. So that's what happened at the Euro match. And it's a tragedy that England lost. We were all looking forward to them winning. It would have raised the mood of the country and lifted everyone out of COVID, but we'll have to do it without that news. But that really soured the event, that little flurry of racism rearing its head again. Deeply, deeply disappointing.
Yes, indeed, I can understand the hurt. But let's hope that, you know, things cool down, and this is a process. It's not going to be a switch that's going to get turned on and everybody is going to start behaving nice. So we have to wait and see. But it is important to bring forth the senselessness of what happened, and that's what I think we're doing here. And Panditji, let's take a look at the recently concluded by-election. Looks like there was a fallout from that in the British Parliament.
Yes, and again, it's the same thread, isn't it? This racism seems to have a seam running through the British establishment, and it keeps rearing its head from time to time. We talked about the Spenley and the by-election, that's right, where Labour produced this horrific leaflet with the Prime Minister Modi shaking hands with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And everybody recognised that it was offensive, that it was a dog whistle. Well, forget a dog whistle, it was almost like a whole orchestra, the brass wind section of an orchestra saying, guys, here's a chance to be racist. And the impact of it was very, very much noticed. It's cast a slur on the whole of the British political establishment. But it was remarkable that after the football match, the Labour Party in Parliament seized upon it to accuse the Conservatives of being racist and not doing enough to tackle racism. And Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he produced that very same leaflet, which the Labour Party had been circulating in the House of Commons, and said, well, hold on a minute, should we have a look at this? Don't you think there's something wrong here? And he produced it and showed it to Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition. And, you know, he asked him to apologise and express regret. Keir Starmer did not apologise. And, you know, we have to recognise that this leaflet was a leaflet officially endorsed and produced by the Labour Party. And that is an incredible fact, that it should have happened. The incredible thing was that Keir Starmer didn't apologise. Now, if you add to that the notion, just recall and remind all of your viewers that only a short while ago, Keir Starmer took the knee. And he and Angela Rayner, they published a photograph of both of them taking the knee in solidarity and, you know, against the ideals of racists, etc. And yet when it comes to a leaflet which is clearly white supremacist, clearly anti-India, anti-Hindu, as discriminatory as it gets, and he couldn't even bring himself to say the words that he apologized for that and it should not be happening and he would be taking disciplinary action. It didn't happen. And this is something that is actually something that worries me a little bit more, and something that we're really trying to grapple with. And that is that with other communities, it seems to be crystal clear to the British establishment where the line is that one mustn't transcend, one mustn't cross. And that line is clear when it comes to the Islamic community. It's crystal clear when it comes to the African community. It's crystal clear when it comes to the Jewish community. But when it comes to the Indian community or the Hindu community, it seems to disappear, it evaporates. And what is wholly unacceptable for anybody else seems to be entirely acceptable for us. And so he didn't apologise, and this, I think, will cost them dearly, because it's going to be emphasised and people are picking it up. There is a groundswell against the Labour Party and its treatment of British Hindus, entirely unacceptable, and it's not going to be allowed to go without a response. But This is only, what, 3 weeks after the British government produced a report saying that there is no such thing as institutional racism here in the United Kingdom. Oh, well, let's see. Let's see. Like the words whitewash and other similar words like that, white lies, etc., seem to spring to mind, don't they?
Absolutely. And viewers, please remember that Boris Johnson in a previous life was a journalist. And I guess that's the investigative journalist in him that rose to the occasion. And, he flashed out offensive poster that the Labour Party had put together. And the rest, as they say, is history. And BoJo is, at least this round, he has won it very convincingly. Keir Starmer could have just said, in the heat of the moment, it was a thoughtless thing. He could have done anything because they won the seat, if I remember correctly, right?
They did by a tiny, tiny majority, and only 328 or something like that. And it's a drop. They've always had a five-figure majority in that seat, and so it's a drop now down to just over 300, which is a terrible thing. But it's the absence of leadership. It's the absence of principled stance which is being noticeable. What would have been the harm in acknowledging that it was an inappropriate leaflet, that it should never have been issued? And it clearly trumpets to everybody that this party chooses its principles according to its vote bank, and that's all there is, which is a tragedy for an opposition. The country is so desperately in need of a solid principled opposition, and it's not there. And we're having Labour member after Labour member making the most ridiculous gaffes. Only last week there was a committee meeting in the House of Commons, and our dear friend Claudia Webb, who is in very shaky territory with regard to her seat, she was asking questions of the Foreign Office of the Minister, Dominic Raab, and the subject was Belarus. And she couldn't even say the name. She called it Belarus. And the moment she said it, everybody looked around at each other and thought, I'm sorry, what did she say? And she said it again. Twice she said it completely incorrectly. And it was apparent that she hadn't read her notes, she hadn't studied the subject, and she was making such a ridiculous question. She was asking, does the British government not feel that there are legal grounds for taking action against Belarus? Okay. And so you could see that the people in the committee room were desperately trying not to embarrass her. And so the Foreign and Commonwealth Office Minister, Dominic Raab, he said, I'm sorry, could you just tell me who you would like us to sue and where you would like us to sue? And she had absolutely no idea. She just completely froze in front of the cameras for seconds, which seemed like hours. But this is the level of competence. And the tragedy is that this is the same Claudia Webb who was presiding over the Labour conference when they passed the anti-India resolution. The quality is terrible. We just long for the days when the likes of Tony Benn, people who were towering figures in the Labour movement, so hopefully they can find people of that caliber and bring them to the fore, because it's desperately needed. But if they don't, then the prospects for the Labour Party are that it will not only alienate the Hindu and Indian vote, but it's also alienating its core white traditional working class English vote. The average English person is a solid salt of the earth person, and they don't like people who do this sort of wishy-washy nonsense, especially when they're being paid 80,000 plus while the rest of the country is tightening its belt. So severe problems there. And again, all hinging around this notion about racism.
Panditji, Lisa Nandi, is she a part of the shadow government?
She is. In fact, she has been gently and quietly and professionally tucked to one side to protect her from any confrontation whatsoever. It's quite extraordinary. It's almost as though somebody realized that she is hopefully a future rising star. She's made a few mistakes and has been caught again in the headlamps like a frozen deer on a number of occasions. And so it does seem as though she's been put to one side to let her ripen a little bit more and become a bit more seasoned and a bit more considered in her judgments and her positions on many things. So we haven't seen hide nor hair of her for a long period of time.
And viewers, now let's touch upon the topic that you all are eagerly waiting for, Rashmi Samant. And if you remember, Satish ji and myself and Rashmi, we had a hangout. And in that hangout, she was expressing doubts on whether she wanted to return to Oxford or not. But thanks to the encouragement given by Pandit ji and a few other well-meaning friends, she not only came back to Oxford, and something really, really nice happened today. Pandit ji, please walk us through what happened today.
Okay, so today, earlier this evening, in fact, late afternoon, we heard that Rashmi had received a communication from the university authorities. And in essence, what they've said to her, and this is as much as can be disclosed at this moment at the time, is that they found in favor and her complaint regarding bullying and harassment has been upheld. So the investigation has been concluded, and the conclusion is unequivocally, undeniably, unquestionably, without any hesitation, that she was the subject of bullying and harassment. Now, the complaint that we had made, and you'll recall that in her very first hearing, I was there with her and provided her with support, and we've been making sure that as a young lady in a different country where she's not familiar with systems and procedures, we've been making sure that she's protected and that she is encouraged and emotionally strong throughout this process. But at the outset, there was pretty much almost like a refusal to acknowledge that this could be true. And it took quite a bit of determination, and it took a real, I think she found within her a resolution and determination as a result of this process to see it through. Can you imagine you have a young student, on the one hand, the university faculty is bullying and harassing her, and the university faculty is who she's dependent upon for securing good grades, and at the same time, you are being publicly vilified, your fellow students are humiliating you, and the Oxford University Students' Union, whose job it is to protect you, have also harassed and bullied you. So this is a person who was completely on her own, and as you say, she had fled and was in Bharat. She'd gone back home to be with her family. And so the journey from there to here has actually been quite a tortuous journey involving a lot of resistance, but it's wonderful that this conclusion has been arrived at. I can't say much more than that with regards to the actual determination until the contents of the judgment are released. I think it's really necessary, though, that the findings are released, because this is now a public interest issue as well, and we would really like this to set a clear precedent as to what the line is that must not be crossed. Because as you know, with us here in Oxford, it's happened in Cambridge, it's happened in Rutgers, there is this difficulty that Hindus seem to be open game. So this is wonderful news, but the story is not over. There were many people who supported this all over the world, and we really derived a lot of encouragement and energy from the support that we got. Many people in the parliament in Bharat, many of our supporting publications, Op India, Nupur Sharma, and people like that, CNN, 18, they all jumped in to find out and to support what this issue was. So we're not done with it yet. Personally, I'm pretty confident that Abhijit Sarkar will appeal. Okay, and that process will probably take its journey. He may choose not to appeal, but I'd be surprised if he didn't. But that wouldn't be enough. I think a wholesome, complete, unconditional apology would be the beginning of the process. I think that his visa should really be reviewed. The British Home Office, we will be asking them to review his visa, because the conditions of receiving a visa to come here and study and to teach are very clear, and he has completely transgressed against the spirit with which that visa is issued. So I really think his visa should be cancelled, and he should be given an opportunity to return home to consider what it is and the seriousness of what he has done. The position of the MEA, our own Indian High Commission, I think they have a role to play. To this day, they have not reached out to support Rashmi, and I find this unacceptable. We have spoken to them, we have gently encouraged them, we have cajoled them, we have written to them, Rashmi has written to them, and she didn't get the support. So, the question does arise, when there's a person in Rashmi's position on her own here, and the university has stepped back and neglected to fulfill its obligation to provide her with a safe, secure environment in which she can learn and study, and the High Commission are not offering her support, then whose role is it to offer her that support? There's a huge vacuum there. Fortunately at this time, many contacts of Rashmiji, Sahana Singh ji over in the United States. She was able to get in touch. We were able to understand what was going on. We were able, coincidentally, under the COVID scenario, to find enough resources and people to pull together a campaign and pursue this. But what if that hadn't happened? We could well have had a distraught student stranded in Bharat on her own and having to forfeit the incredible cost that it must have taken her, and to perhaps even fail in her studies. And that would have been a terrible outcome. So there is a gap there, and I think the Home Office, the Home Ministry, and indeed the High Commission, they really could do with scratching their heads and making sure that this doesn't happen in future. So let's see. The work is not over. The first step is there. We have acknowledgement. We will be asking the police for their conclusions. They came to the conclusion that there was no case to answer. And now, with the investigation having been conducted, I'll be taking it up with the Commissioner and the Assistant Commissioner for the Thames Valley Police Force to find out what's going on there. And let's see. We will pursue this through. So it's been an interesting journey. We're approaching, I hope, what is the final lap. I must say, one thing that is wonderful that has emerged from this is that Rashmi Samant will emerge from Oxford University, hopefully with two wonderful qualifications. One is the qualification, the academic qualification that she has striven and worked hard for, and we wish her every success with that. So the second badge of honor that I think she will receive is the badge of honor relating to her blossoming and flourishing as a genuine Sanatani, a Hindu. I think she is more aware of her Hindu identity now, having been sort of battered and bruised because of it, than possibly she was beforehand, even more so. But I think the second badge will be a badge of honor. She has found within herself the determination, the resilience, the confidence to be able to say, this is wrong. Not only is this wrong, it's an injustice, and I will not stand for it. And so in that sense, I think she'll be a wonderful role model. Let's see what happens, but I'm confident that many other students will take from this lesson and find inspiration and energy to make sure that they too have the strength to stand and prevent injustices being inflicted upon them. So wonderful work, Rashmiji, and we look forward to watching you and seeing you grow and blossom as a full-fledged member of the ancient Sanatani civilization.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more, Pandit Ji. Rashmi Samant Ji, all the best in your future endeavors, and we will keep you updated on all the other things that are going to take place. Like Pandit Ji said, there are many other things, processes that will have to find their logical conclusion, but this is the first critical step, and that has been successfully achieved. Let's wait and see how this plays out. Panditji, as always, a pleasure and honor to have you with us, and we'll be back again in a few weeks' time as we cover things in the United Kingdom. Namaskar.